Good morning. How you guys doing? Good. All right. Well, hope you're having a good summer. I want to ask you to open a Bible with me to John chapter 10 as we continue this summer just looking at the life of Jesus in the Gospel of John. We're in chapter 10 this morning, and I'm just going to read verses 7 through 10 for us as we begin our time together. It says in verse 7, Jesus again said to them, "Truly, truly, I say to you, I am the door of the sheep. All who came before me are thieves and robbers, but the sheep did not listen to them. I am the door. If anyone enters by me, he will be saved and will go in and out and find pasture. The thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy. I came that they may have life and have it abundantly." This passage is actually the passage that created a crisis of faith in my life. Because in this passage, we receive this really bold claim and promise from Jesus that if you come to him and follow him, he will give you abundant life. We see that right there in verse 10. Right, that the word abundant actually means excessive, like more than you need. It kind of brings this idea of always increasing, like that kind of life, you know. The problem is, I think that we have different translation issues when it comes to interpreting the words abundant life. We can hear that and then interpret it a way that maybe Jesus doesn't intend for us to interpret it. I was reflecting and thinking back to when my kids were really young, and many of you know that we lived in kind of the Central Valley in Oregon, and so every summer we would take our kids out blueberry picking. And it was such a great time. It was really enjoyable. It sounds more fun than you might think if that sounds boring to you. And I don't know why, but for some reason on the drive to the farm that we were going to pick blueberries, we started on this conversation about how you would see in the news like a parent who leaves their kids in a car, locked in a car with the windows up during the summertime where it's hot, and how those parents get arrested and how that's not good and all this kind of. I don't know why we were talking about this. That was not a subject I brought up. Maybe my kids heard a story about something like that, about how some lady got arrested or whatever. So we kind of put it to bed. We picked our blueberries, and when we were finished, I loaded up all the kids in our van and got them situated, and I closed all the doors and everything, and I was like, I'll be right back. I'm going to go get the rest of our supplies, like our buckets and stuff. And as I'm walking away, I was maybe 10 feet away from the car, and I hear the door open, and my little girl, Eden, she just, in this most panicking voice, screaming, saying, "Dad, you are going to get arrested," And I looked back, and I was so confused, why is she saying that, And then I was like, oh yeah, we talked about, this kind of stuff. And I'm trying to help her interpret what that means and how you're supposed to understand that, right? And so if you have kids, you probably have so many stories like that, or maybe you all were a kid at one point. There were things that your parents said to you that you misinterpreted, right? This is just how life works. Now, this actually happened to Pepsi, the great soda, not as good as Coke, but nonetheless, Pepsi was struggling in the mid-1900s, and they were struggling to reach the younger generation of people. And so in the 60s, they came up with a new slogan. They thought, man, this slogan will really connect with the next generation that's up and coming, and their slogan was, "Come alive with Pepsi." And it actually worked. It actually worked. All these younger people, I don't know what was going on in the 60s. I wasn't alive in the 60s. Well, I've heard what was going on in the 60s. But that really resonated with young people, oh yeah, let's come alive and be free. And they were drinking Pepsi. And this was working all over the place, except Pepsi noticed that in China, there was a decline, actually, in people buying Pepsi. And they kind of began to look into this. And what they discovered was that for some reason, when this phrase, "come alive with Pepsi," was translated into, whether it was Cantonese or Mandarin, I'm not sure, but whenever it was translated, it came out to something like this: Pepsi brings your ancestors back from the dead. And I guess people were like, I don't want to drink Pepsi. Like, I don't want that to happen. And so they did, Pepsi was on the decline, and so they had to correct that sort of thing, right? You see, we have different translation issues when it comes to interpreting words in life. And how you interpret it really matters. And it definitely matters when we consider this promise from Jesus that if you come to him and if he shepherds your soul, you will experience life abundantly. We have different ideas of what it means to come alive, don't we, though? For me, I grew up hearing this promise of Jesus my whole life, and then when I got to the age of 15, I looked around, and it seemed like everybody else was coming alive. And it felt like I was sinking into the grave. Like everybody else was just experiencing so much love and joy and pleasure and popularity. And I was like, man, that feels like the definition of abundant life. And whatever I was interpreting from Jesus was not that. And the irony is, I took those words, abundant life, and I interpreted them in such a way that I wanted it to be defined. I wanted that to mean something specific, that maybe Jesus actually didn't mean. And what ended up happening for me is I walked away from Jesus for at least 5 years of my life, not realizing that I was walking away from the very person that I was made for, the person that actually fulfills his promise to us. So what if Jesus really is true to his promise? Right? What if Jesus really is telling you the truth this morning? Then we must get these words right. And what we see this morning are two I am statements of Jesus. Jesus revealing something about himself that has rich background to it that we're going to get into. And what we learn here is that Jesus makes both our access and ongoing provision of abundant life not only possible, but abundantly clear to us. And so we're going to take these two I am statements. The first is this, that Jesus is the door. He says, I am the door. We've already read that. And what this means for us is that clearly there is only one way in. There's only one way in. This is what he means. There's only one way in. So if you want abundant life, eternal life that's found in the presence of God, in the midst of his people, if you want abundant life, there's only one way in. He gives us this figure of speech beginning in verses 1 through 6. Let's read it together. He says, truly, truly, I say to you, he who does not enter the sheepfold by the door, but climbs in another way, that man is a thief and a robber. But he who enters by the door is the shepherd of the sheep. To him the gatekeeper opens. The sheep hear his voice, and he calls his own sheep by name and leads them out. And when he has brought out all of his own, he goes before them, and the sheep follow him, and they know his voice. A stranger they will not follow, but they will flee from him, for they do not know the voice of strangers. This figure of speech Jesus used with them, but they did not understand what he was saying to them. So he gives them this figure of speech to help them try to understand where we can access this abundant life that all these Jewish people are longing for. And they're listening to his words, and they would have been really familiar with these images. These images that Jesus is using were potent because they were just so accustomed to seeing this in their everyday life, though that's not the case for us. And so I brought for you an image of an ancient Near East sheep pen that's built of stone out in the countryside. This is often what they would look at. If we could put that picture up on the screen, you would find these all over the place. These stone pens that are built out in the countryside, anybody could use them, okay? So what you would do is these people, these shepherds, they would bring their sheep in there, most likely at night, so their flock would be safe. And you would see there's no gate, there's no built gate or fence or something like that. There's no door. You'll just see a gap, right? And what the shepherds would do is at night, while the sheep were sleeping, the shepherd himself would sleep in the gap. They would sleep in the door to guard and protect the sheep in the midst of everything that might threaten them. The shepherd was the door. He kept thieves and wild animals from coming in. So even people who are familiar with these images, though, are hearing the words of Jesus, and they're not really quite tracking with him. And so he tells them explicitly what he means by this. We've already read this. Verse 7, he just says, I'm the door. I'm the door of the sheep. Verse 8, all who came before me are thieves and robbers, but the sheep didn't listen to them. He's referring, yes, to all the former shepherds or leaders of God's people who did not lead them in the way that would point them to the truth about who God is and the promise of his Messiah and living faithfully in the way God had designed them to live. There were many people who had gone before them who did not lead God's people in the right way. But he's most explicitly talking in this context about the Pharisees, who are thieves, who are trying to climb over the walls and steal the sheep and kind of persuade them away from God in the flesh, Jesus Christ himself. They're imitating the voice of the shepherd, but those ears, they don't hear the truth. The eyes, they don't see what they're supposed to see. Right? They're not like the blind man who we just looked at last week, who now sees Jesus and worships him. They see how Jesus, God in the flesh, has treated this man. They've seen how Jesus treated the woman that was caught in adultery. And they don't see what those people saw, right? And so in verse 9, he explicitly again says, I am the door. If anyone enters by me, he will be saved and go in and out and find pasture. But the thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy. But I came that they may have life and have it abundantly. Jesus is saying to them, I'm the only way into the pasture of God, into the flock, the fold of God. I'm the door back into the presence of God. So you want abundant life that is only found in the presence and protection and pasture of God? There is only one way in. Jesus is saying it's through me. I'm the door. Now, for most of us, we can maybe imagine sheep and shepherds and images like this, but we don't live in a world where we just see sheep pens everywhere. And so I have another image for you and potentially here a quiz for you. Do you guys recognize this door? Do you guys recognize this door? This is 10 Downing Street in London, England, right? This is the door to the home of the British Prime Minister. This has been the case from the first Prime Minister to people like Winston Churchill and Margaret Thatcher and Tony Blair, and now apparently Keir Starmer. Just learned his name this week, actually, right? But they all have lived behind that door. And that door, it historically has been this beautiful black oak solid door, this beautiful door. But in 1991, there was an IRA pipe bomb that was blown up near the proximity of that building, of that house. And that kind of was enough to cause the British government to say, hey, we've got to protect this place more. And so they took out that old door that was actually built in 1772, and they replaced it in 1992 with this steel bulletproof replica. It looks like wood, it's not wood though. Right? There's a gold slot there. It looks like you could drop a letter in. That doesn't work. Right? They don't want anybody dropping anything in there. There looks like there's no keyhole if you look in there, and you see a doorknob right in the center of that door, but interestingly enough, it doesn't work. It doesn't even turn. You can't get in. If you look closely, this is all that you'll see. The door can only be opened now from the inside. That's the only way to open that door. And the security guard who stands just inside that door opens the door only to the prime minister, only to the people the prime minister wants to let in. This is exactly the picture that Jesus presents for us here. It's not the first time, though, that the image of this door comes up in the Bible. Right? Doors are actually a really, really big deal in the Bible. This is so important, it's really worth it. I need you to know this. So just think back with me in Genesis. Genesis chapter 3, we learn that Adam and Eve first sin. Sin is brought into this world, and what happens? They are removed from the only place where true abundant life was ever experienced, in the presence of God, without the presence of sin. And after they were removed, angels were placed at the entry door to the Garden of Eden with flaming swords in their hands that are barring any re-entry into that place. We can read about this in Genesis 3. It says this: the Lord sent him, Adam, out of the Garden of Eden to work the ground from which he was taken. He drove out the man, and at the east of the Garden of Eden, he placed the cherubim and flaming sword that turned every way to guard the way to the tree of life. This door theme continues in Genesis chapter 6, where God looks upon the earth and sees all the wickedness, and he commands Noah to build an ark. And the way in which he told him to do that was to build an ark in such a way that he would bring his family with him into the ark and all the animals, and there would be one door. And once they all got on the ark, God himself, the scripture says, closed the door. This theme continues. You get into Exodus and you begin to see the construction and the design of the tabernacle, specifically that will lead towards the temple, which is what? It's the representation of God dwelling with his people, right? So you look at those dimensions, and the only way that you can get into the tabernacle courtyard was through one gate, right? Through one gate. Right? It wasn't built like our churches that have like multiple entrance and exit doors for fire code reasons. Right? You couldn't build this back then, or maybe I'm sure God would still build it, and people just have to deal with it, or nonetheless, right? But there's only one door in and out of the tabernacle courtyard. And it was through this massive, thick curtain. And if you could actually go through that door, if you actually did that, the first thing you would encounter upon entering that temple was the bronze altar on which the sacrifices for sin were offered. What's the message there? There's only one way to get to God, and it's through this altar. Then there was the door into the Holy of Holies where the Ark of the Covenant was, which was also covered by another thick curtain. And only the high priest could pass through that door, and only once a year on the Day of Atonement, when he sprinkled the blood of a sacrificed lamb on the mercy seat on top of the Ark of the Covenant. And if anyone else ever tried to enter that area by any other way or for any other reason or at any other time, they were struck dead. There was only one way in. And so very interestingly, in front of the entrance of the Holy of Holies were carvings of angels standing guard, and another two on top of the mercy seat, symbolic of those angels that had their flaming swords that guarded the entryway back into the Garden of Eden, the paradise of God's presence. So doors are like a big deal in the Bible, which, if you understand all that, then makes Jesus' claim here all the more significant, because his claim is that he is saying, I am the fulfillment of what all those other doors were ultimately pointing towards. That this abundant life, this enjoyment that comes from experiencing the presence of God, that very abundant life, the life that we've been barred from because of our sin, and now, finally, there is a door open for you to re-enter. But there's only one way in. Jesus is showing us that he is the center of the universe. Right? He doesn't say, I'm a door. He says, I am the door. I am the door. There is a definite article there. I am the door. There isn't another door. And so I'm telling you this morning, if you want life, you must have Jesus. If you want life, you have to have Jesus. This is why Peter stood up in Acts chapter 4 and he preached, there is salvation in no one else. For there is no other name under heaven given among men by which we must be saved. Although his claim is completely exclusive, there is only one door, there is only one way, this exclusive claim is made available to all. Did you look down with me in verse 16? What does he say? I have other sheep. He's talking to Jewish people here, now referring to the Gentiles, which, good news, that would be you and me. Right? Jesus is talking about you. Think about that. He's talking about you in verse 16. I have other sheep that are not of this fold. I must bring them also, and they will listen to my voice, so there will be one flock and one shepherd. The nations will come in through Jesus and only Jesus. There is no other way in. Right? So this is why we pray for the nations. This is why we want to send out missionaries, right? We believe that there are people in Turkey, in Turkmenistan, all over Central Asia, for example, this morning, that will enter in through Jesus and experience this abundant life. And we also believe the neighbor across the street, your coworker, anybody that you can think of, the only way in is through Jesus. That's the only way. He is the door. It really is as simple as it sounds. You must go through Jesus to get life, and so therefore, hear me very clearly, avoiding Jesus will never bring you life. It will only bring you death. If you're trying to avoid Jesus, it will never bring you life. Not in the way he's promising. And I know what that sounds like. I mean, in our day and age of pluralism, the most common objection to Jesus' claim of exclusivity is to ask, or at least wonder, why is there only one way in? You Christians are so off with the times. Come alive with Pepsi, you know? Why is there only one way in? But the truth of the matter is, if you understand the history of the world, which I just went over it with you in part, and you knew that there was a way, we would fall to our knees with relief, praising God that there's even a way back in. I mean, just think about this. Just think about this idea. Imagine this morning if you found out you were really sick, and that sickness was going to lead to your death. And so you got called in to sit down with your doctor, and he went over treatment options with you, and he says, hey, I'm going to start with the best news, right? We have a treatment. We have a medicine that is proven to cure your illness, your disease, and you will live, right? Imagine you heard that news. You just walked in there thinking you were going to die. There was no way to escape that. But all of a sudden, the doctor tells you there is a way. There is a treatment that will save your life. What would you say to that person? Would you respond by saying, oh man, that's amazing, but what are my other options? Right? Is there another option? I'm all about options, you know? Unless there's multiple options, you know, I don't think I'm going to take that medicine. You know, I don't think I'd do that. I doubt you would say that, right? I doubt you would say, I'm going to figure out another way. No, you would take the medicine, wouldn't you? You would do that. But then apply this illustration in a different way. Imagine your approach to that situation was just to think to yourself, you know what? I feel kind of fine today. Like, I don't know, doc, I think you're lying to me. I know you ran the tests, but I feel pretty good. I'm not that sick, but thank you for your concern. Right? If you really are sick, in a sickness that would lead to death, thinking you aren't sick is not helping you in the long run, is it? Your pride is going to kill you. Your pride will kill you. Avoiding the medicine isn't life, but death. And so I'm telling you guys this morning, if you want life, you must have Jesus. No one else can save you, even if they think they can save you. Nothing else can do that, even if they promise you that that can happen. There's a lot of voices in this world. The voice of the thief in this world. The voice of those that would really, they're just out to steal and kill and destroy you. Voices that will want to convince you that there is another way. Right? That there are many ways. That there are many doors. And all the voices like that in this world, they will frame out this exclusive claim of Jesus as a lie to you. They will frame it out as a lie, and the argument they will make to you is they will say that's a lie because God is loving. He is loving, so you mean to tell me he made all these people in the world, all these people who are, good people with devoutness in their religion, and, you think of the Muslims or something that are, they're just following Muhammad who taught them the way through the Quran, but they're well-intentioned, right? And so you mean to tell me that God is loving and he's going to do that? No, I believe he's loving, and so therefore, there's all these ways. There's all these doors. He's loving, and so you could take many paths to God. But is that what defines God as loving? Well, verses 11 through 18 reveal to us God's great love and precisely why he's called good. He isn't called good because he opens 100 doors for you to get to heaven. He is good because he, Jesus, God in the flesh, will lay down his life so that you could finally come in. Jesus is the good shepherd. That's the second thing and last thing we see this morning. And what I want you to see here, because we're going to explore this a lot more next week, this voice of the good shepherd. But Jesus here is the good shepherd, and what I want you to see is that that means there is only one voice worth following in this world. There's only one way in, and there is only one voice that will continually provide for you this abundant life. What does it say in verse 11? I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. And then verses 12 to 13, we see the bad shepherds. He who is a hired hand and not a shepherd, who does not own the sheep, sees the wolf coming and leaves the sheep and flees. And the wolf snatches them and scatters them. He flees because he's a hired hand and cares nothing for the sheep. Again, I am the good shepherd. I know my own, and my own know me, just as the Father knows me, and I know the Father, and I lay down my life for the sheep. And I have other sheep that are not of this fold. I must bring them also, and they will listen to my voice. So there will be one flock, one shepherd. Jesus. For this reason, the Father loves me, because I lay down my life that I may take it up again. No one takes it from me, but I lay it down of my own accord. I have authority to lay it down, and I have authority to take it up again. This charge I have received from my Father. What does this mean, that Jesus is the good shepherd of us? Well, I'm going to tell you, background always enriches the present. It always enriches the present. Like one example of that, just imagine that you were so badly wanting to have a child, but you and your spouse were unable to have children. Then you got pregnant a few different times, and you had multiple miscarriages. And let's just say the friends and family around you, they knew that situation, like they knew all that background, but then the day came where you announced to everybody, we are pregnant. Right? And if I knew the background of that whole story, and then we prayed for you and walked with you all the day to the moment that I saw you and your newborn healthy child, and you put that baby in my arms, and you said it's a boy or whatever it is. Knowing the background enriches that present moment. Because it's always great when someone says we're pregnant, right? It's always great when someone says the baby's healthy, but if you knew all that took place in order to get to that moment, that would make that moment feel like so much more gravity was to it. Do you see what I'm saying? The same is true here with us. When Jesus says, I am the good shepherd, if you don't know the background of that, it doesn't really land in the way that it's supposed to land. The image of a shepherd has been extremely prominent throughout the Bible. And so understanding that helps us feel the weight of Jesus' words here when he makes this bold claim. So did you know that the very first shepherd that ever shows up in the Bible is Abel? In Genesis chapter 4, the very first shepherd in the Bible is Abel. But then he is murdered by his brother Cain. So let's think about that. The first shepherd in the Bible was murdered. It's kind of interesting. Then from Abraham to Moses, all the patriarchs, all the leaders of God's people, all the people that God made covenants with to bless the nations, they were all actually shepherds. Abraham was a shepherd, Isaac was a shepherd, Jacob was a shepherd, Moses was a shepherd. It's telling you something. The people whom God is going to work through in this world are shepherds, and they take care of sheep. This is what you will always see until you get to the end of Genesis and the life of Jacob, where he's about to die. And what does he say in Genesis 48? He says this, the God before whom my fathers Abraham and Isaac walked, the God who has been my shepherd all my life long to this day. Jacob is the first person who sees God as a shepherd. This is the first metaphorical use of the word shepherd in the Bible, but now the majority of references that you would ever read from this point forward in the Bible that are a reference to shepherds and sheep will almost predominantly always be a reference to caring for people. Moses takes care of sheep. David, when he is called to be the king, he's taking care of sheep. And so David famously writes Psalm 23, which we're going to sing at the end of our service today. And what does he say? The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. Right? God is a shepherd. The Bible makes it very clear. It says the prophet Isaiah said this, God will tend his flock like a shepherd. He will gather the lambs in his arms. He will carry them in his bosom and gently lead those that are with young. God is a shepherd, but he will always delegate his care for his people to under-shepherds. And when you see others abuse this responsibility, they are severely judged in the Bible. And so all along the way, each shepherd ends up doing this. They're horrible shepherds. They lead God's people astray. They lead them into sin and away from God over and over and over again. And so God speaks through the prophet Ezekiel in Ezekiel 34. And what does he say? I will set up over them one shepherd, my servant David, and he shall feed them. He shall feed them and be their shepherd. And I, the Lord, will be their God. And my servant David shall be prince among them. I am the Lord, I have spoken. When Ezekiel says this, David's dead. So you go, who is he talking about? Who is he talking about? Who will that be? Jesus stands in front of a bunch of Jewish people who are teaching the Old Testament to others. And he's very clear. With the background which now enriches this present, Jesus speaks these words twice. I am the good shepherd. I'm the one. I'm the one who's the good shepherd, who you've been waiting for to fulfill these promises that God has made for you. Well, what does this good shepherd do? Will he use his position for his own gain? Will he use selfishly his status to kind of use other people to selfishly serve him and make his life more comfortable? Will he sacrifice other people so that he can live? Is this what this good shepherd will do? No. Quite the opposite. In fact, no, he will lay his life down for the sheep. I mean, do you see this? What makes him different than all the other shepherds that have ever gone before him? What makes Jesus different than all the other leaders in this world that you could ever listen to and follow? What makes him different than every single person who takes their authority and uses it for their own gain and their own advantage at the expense of other people? What makes Jesus so different? What makes him good? Well, when the threats come, he doesn't get scared. He's not scared of anything. When the threats come, he isn't like, you can have that sheep, as long as I protect myself. He doesn't do that. That's what the hired hands do in 12 through 13. No, bad shepherds live to protect themselves. The hired hand, the thief, sacrifices us for themselves, sacrifices you for them. But look, Jesus sacrifices himself for us. And we learn very clearly that it's not because other people were more powerful than him. It's not because they trapped him and he finally couldn't figure out how to get away. It's not because they were smarter or wiser. Right? The only way that Jesus' life would ever come to an end is if he laid it down willingly. He says, no one can take it from me. So he is good because he will give his life for the sheep. That is kind of crazy when you think about it. The shepherd is, I know we don't know much about shepherds and sheep, right? But the shepherd is way more valuable than a sheep, isn't it? Just imagine you had a friend who had this dog that they admired and loved. Roxy or something is the dog's name, let's just say. And they loved their dog, and they're sitting there telling you one day, man, if anything ever happened to this dog, I would give my life so that Roxy could keep living. Imagine they said that to you. And you knew they were serious, which in our day and age, people might say that and actually believe that, right? So that's a real, example probably. But let's just say that they said that to you. What would you think? You would, as a loving friend, want to say to that person, can we rethink this a little bit? Your life is a lot more valuable than Roxy. He's like, sure, Roxy's cute and cool and protects your house and stuff like that, but you are way more valuable than a dog, right? Think about it. Think about it. So why would a shepherd die for sheep? Especially when that shepherd has divine blood pumping through his veins. I mean, isn't he of infinite more worth and value than you and me? And yet, he says, I have come so that you could come back in. The only way is through that altar. It's through that door. And no one can take it from me, but I'm so good. I've come to lay it down. He's defining what is good. And so, if his laying his life down is the means by which you can now go through him as the door, are you really going to look at God and question his goodness? I mean, if there are many doors, which is what this world would tell you, why would Jesus need to die if there are other ways? That doesn't even make sense. He's way more valuable than we are. I mean, he's God himself, but now if there was no other way back in except through the blood of the Lamb, and the shepherd who has divine blood pumping through his veins gives his own lifeblood, and that was the only way back in, then man, how good is he? I mean, he gives his life for the sheep. Life for the sheep is death for the shepherd. Do you know that what it costs to give you abundant life came at the expense of the shepherd? The slaughtered lamb is the shepherd, and the promise here this morning is that he will never stop shepherding you. Not even in heaven, because what does it say in Revelation 7:17? This is a picture of heaven. It says, for the Lamb in the midst of the throne will be their shepherd, and he will guide them to springs of living water, and God will wipe away every tear from their eyes. We're going to get more into this prominent theme of his voice next week, but today I simply want to ask you, if your shepherd laid down his life for you, and he will never lose you, but will always care for you. He will always protect you. He will always watch over you. And he will always lead you in and out and find pasture, read abundant life. Then can't we trust him through anything that we're being walked through right now? I mean, through anything. Our kids, historically, like every parent, I'm sure, have often asked us, to allow them to try different things, watch different things, listen to different things. And so as a parent, it's like, I feel like one of the most difficult things to navigate is just like, should I let my kids do this or not, And there's no clear answer sometimes. And so as a parent, you're constantly evaluating, is this good, is this not good? And so if my kids said to me like, hey, Dad, could we watch this? And we evaluate, and we said, no, I'm sorry. You can't watch that. And the reason is because of this. We just want that feeding your mind or your heart or something like that, right? We might say no. And my kids have never said, oh, yeah, sweet, that's what I was hoping you'd say. Like we were thinking the same thing, that wouldn't be good, No, every time, like every kid, like you were this way even as a kid, right? They will say, why? Right? They will say, why? So-and-so has seen it. And I'll go, well, I'm not so-and-so's parent, or else I wouldn't let them see it either. This kind of thing. We say it's not good for you. And here's the thing, if one of my children were so bold as to pout and say, well, then you don't love me. You're not good. Because I don't understand why I can't have blank, whatever, If we wanted to respond to that in the right way, we've never done this maybe, but we would maybe take a deep breath and we could say, you don't think I love you? You don't think I'm good? Can I just remind you of all the ways we've demonstrated our love for you over the years, all the ways that we've tried to help you navigate certain things, and we have not been perfect. We haven't made all the best decisions. Right, but we get this, right? This idea of questioning. And so maybe you're here this morning and you came to Jesus at one point. You came to him as the door. You've experienced the life of his leadership in your life, but you're walking through this life and you're going through something. You're in a place, maybe you're hearing other voices, and you're beginning to reinterpret his promise. Saying, well, maybe these other voices are right. Maybe Jesus is wrong. Maybe the way that they are telling me to go is going to lead me to life. I don't know if he's good. I don't know if I can trust him. But I love how Martin Luther says, I know not the way God leads me, but well do I know my guide. I don't always know where we're at. I don't always know the next turn. I don't always know the destination, but I don't need to. I don't know how big the mountains are going to be. I don't know how dark the valleys are going to be that I'm going to be led down, but I do trust that he is good. I do trust that he loves me. I do trust that in the midst of that, he will provide for me everything that I need. Everything that I need. He will care for me. Don't doubt the goodness of Jesus. I get up at 4 a.m. every Sunday. I don't recommend it, but I do, to get ready for our services. The one benefit is this time of year, I get to see some pretty sweet sunrises. And this morning was no exception. It was stunning. I wish I could describe it for you. I mean, it was just like a mixture of like pink and purple and blue, and there was all these kind of wispy clouds over the San Bernardino Mountains, and the light was kind of illuminating behind them, and you could kind of see all the palm trees in front of it. It was just absolutely stunning. And so here's the thing, I could try my best to describe the sunrise to you, and all you're going to do is go, that sounds cool, right? All you're going to do is maybe be a little bit more interested in getting up earlier to see it one day, right? But sunrises aren't meant to be described, are they? They're meant to be experienced. It's the only way. It would have just been better if you woke up with me, met me here, and we admired it together. And what I'm saying is I don't want to just tell you that Jesus is amazing. I don't just want to tell you that. I don't want to just tell you that he's what you need, though he is, even if you don't think you need him. You need him more than anything. You need him more than air. But you must wake up and go outside and experience the sunrise that is Jesus. And the only way is to go to him and to say, there is no other way. There is no other way. Right? He is the door. He is the good shepherd. And because he is, so we are. So we have hope in this world. Life is only found in him. He is the only way in. Follow his voice. His voice is the only voice worth following in this world. I mean, who else is qualified to lead your soul? Who else qualified to do that except God himself? I mean, who else will you go to? Who else's way is actually better? What other way has proven itself over and over and over and over again to be good and true and right from generation to generation? Who else's leadership has proven that? Whose voice can you trust in our day and age? Well, only the one who made you and knows you inside and out, who wired you. Only he knows how life works. And so if you want abundant life today, but your interpretation of that is, man, just pleasure, just feeling good, the quick and easy and immediate gratification of moments in this world, then you, like me when I was younger, you'll think Jesus is not keeping his promise. But I'm telling you, if you want life, abundant, real, true life, there is only one way in. And if you want to continually experience that life, that abundant, real, true life today, then there's only one voice worth following. Amen? Let's pray.